Welcome back to Battlefield of Survival. Today we're diving into the culinary survival techniques people mastered during the Great Depression. Skills that required little to no money, but kept families alive and fed. If you're passionate about history, survival, or practical self-reliance, make sure to hit subscribe, like this video, and leave a comment with your thoughts on these techniques. These are skills that can still be applied today, whether you're exploring historical cooking or preparing for emergency situations. Stretching every ingredient to its absolute limit was essential. During the 1930s, households couldn't afford waste. Families learned to use every part of an ingredient, transforming scraps into meals. Vegetable peels, stems, and even bruised produce were boiled into broths or mashed into soups. You know, meat bones weren't just tossed out. They were simmered for hours slowly to extract every ounce of flavour and nutrition. For a practical example, just take leftover chicken bones or even vegetable scraps. Simmer them in water for several hours and, well, toss in whatever herbs or onion skins you've got lying around. The result really is a rich, nourishing broth that can serve as a base for soups or stews. This approach, honestly, maximizes nutrition and teaches patience, a skill still relevant for anyone focused on food sustainability or, emergency preparedness. Fermentation and preservation skills were, without a doubt, survival tools. With limited access to fresh produce, families relied heavily on fermentation. Sauerkraut, pickles, and fermented vegetables were staples because they extended shelf life and, added essential nutrients. Even root vegetables could be stored for months in cool, dark places, and fermenting them prevented spoilage. For practical application today, anyone can start with a simple cabbage fermentation. You just slice the cabbage, add salt, pack it tightly into a jar, and let it ferment at room temperature for a week or more. You end up with a sour, vitamin-rich food that keeps for months without refrigeration. These techniques are directly transferable to modern survival kitchens or off-grid living situations. Understanding the power of one-pot meals. One-pot cooking wasn't just convenient, it was actually a survival strategy. It allowed families to create filling, nutritious meals from minimal ingredients, all while conserving fuel and time. Beans, grains, and whatever vegetables were on hand were combined into stews that could feed an entire family. For example, a simple bean and potato stew requires only dried beans, water, and a few vegetables, yet it delivers protein, fibre, and calories. For modern survivalists, learning to cook layered flavours in one pot means you can create meals that satisfy nutritional needs while reducing complexity and waste. Now, using foraged and overlooked foods effectively, that became a real skill for many folks, especially when times were tough. People during the Depression, they often turned to foraging and overlooked foods just to supplement their diets and, honestly, to get by day to day. Dandelion greens, wild onions, and, even certain weeds became vital sources of nutrition for families trying to make ends meet. Even acorns were processed into flour for bread when wheat was unavailable. Applying this knowledge today starts with understanding local edible plants. Learn to identify safe foraging options in your area. Boil or blanch greens to remove bitterness, grind nuts for flour, or, combine wild roots with staple grains. This expands your culinary repertoire and honestly prepares you for times when store-bought food may not be accessible. Stretching grains and legumes to feed more mouths. Grains and legumes were stretched with clever techniques. Rice, oats and beans could be combined with vegetables or small amounts of meat to create hearty, satisfying meals. Oatmeal wasn't just breakfast. It became a base for breads, dumplings and even pancakes when eggs or milk were scarce. A practical modern adaptation is cooking dried beans with rice and vegetables, adding a small amount of broth or herbs to enhance flavour. You end up with a meal that's filling, economical and nutritionally balanced, exactly what families relied on during the 1930s. Repurposing leftovers was a necessity, not an option. Leftovers weren't stored for convenience, they were the backbone of survival. Day-old bread could be transformed into puddings or dumplings. Mashed vegetables became fillings for pies or patties. Even leftover meat was chopped finely and incorporated into soup stews or vegetable mixes. To apply this today, consider creating layered casseroles from leftovers. A few potatoes, a handful of vegetables, and a small amount of protein can be baked into a dish that's both economical and nourishing. Mastering this skill reduces food waste and enhances your ability to feed multiple people with limited resources. Simple cooking tools were, elevated to their full potential. Depression-era families didn't rely on expensive cookware or modern appliances. For modern practitioners, mastering basic cookware techniques is honestly invaluable. Cooking became a form of ingenuity and resilience. Applying these lessons today means approaching cooking not just as a task, but as a practice in efficiency, creativity, and survival readiness. These Great Depression cooking skills are timeless. They teach patience, ingenuity, and respect for food, qualities that are as relevant today as they were nearly a century ago. By practicing these techniques, you don't just learn history, you live it. You become capable of feeding yourself and others even in challenging circumstances. If you found these strategies valuable, make sure to subscribe to Battlefield of Survival, like the video, and share your thoughts in the comments. Share this knowledge with fellow history buffs and survivalists. Mastering these skills ensures that the ingenuity of the past continues to guide us in the present and future.